the Black Album. Alright, so how much more black can this album get?
And the answer is none. None
Is that good?
more black.
You said it, Nigel. Alright, so now I'm about to talk about, basically the biggest commercial success in Metallica's career, and it is the most successful album to have come out ever since SoundScan was incorporated into the Billboard tallies, and yeah, there's definitely a lot to talk about with this one. This is an album where its reputation far precedes that of the actual musical content itself. Like, even if people haven't listened to the album, they'll definitely get an impression of what to think of it, just based on the album cover, based on its history, based on what other people have been talking about it. Many people have said that this was the death of Metallica, like, period. Others have said that this is still a really awesome album, even if it is a change in style from the previous albums, which I fall into that camp myself. Even though it is a change in style for Metallica, even though it's not as fast and stuff as like And Justice for All, Master of Puppets, stuff like that, and even though it did point towards a more subpar career for this band, just as this album stands, I think this album is pretty fucking fantastic. And of course, before I go on, there is another lineup change that occurs with this album, although it's not with the actual band members, it's with the producer. Flemming Rasmussen is replaced by Bob Rock, who has produced Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood, which came out like a couple of years before this one. And they liked how Dr. Feelgood sounded, so they figured they'd get Bob Rock to produce this album here. And the result is actually probably their best sounding album to date, just on a pure production level. It completely contrasting with the rough and tumble sound of their earlier recordings, and it far surpasses the more stripped down nature of their later albums, and in the case of Death Magnetic, the more overly compressed, overly fucked with sound of that album in particular, and I have a good feeling that the next Metallica album will also have that same problem, but we'll see when we get there. Everything is exactly where it should be in the mix. Nothing feels out of place, nothing is too high or low, everything is right where it needs to be. So the sound is very comfortable on the ears, it's a very accessible listen, nothing's too stripped down, nothing is too overly compressed in your face. There's nothing too low in the mix, like on Injustice for All. Like, here you finally hear Jason Newsted shine with his awesome bass. So of course that's very much where it needs to be, and it's not overly compressed. The dynamics aren't fucked with like they are on Death Magnetic. This is basically Metallica's best production. And if you guys wanted to know what was my first album by this band, and also what was the first bit of metal that I've ever heard, period, yeah, this album right here is basically one of the first metal albums I've ever heard. While Master of Puppets is the first Metallica album I bought, and Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden is the first metal album that I've ever received, period, as like a birthday present, like 5 years ago actually, which is quite a bit of time by now. This is basically what first kickstarted my interest in metal music in the first place. I first heard it from my older brother, who hates metal music, but he really likes Guitar Hero and Rock Band just as much as I do. He showed me Enter Sandman, and of course, as I was really into Guitar Hero at the time, I'm not so much into it now, more so back then, but I still love it, but I'm sidetracking. Yeah, as I was a big fan of that, I of course was really hooked on this song, and I wanted to hear more from this band, and hear more from other artists like AC/DC and Led Zeppelin and stuff, so this continued me down the path from hard rockdom to metaldom. This definitely helped me develop more into the kind of stuff that I like now. All the stuff you see behind me is as a result of this initial interest in Metallica's music. The songwriting itself is very consistent and solid throughout. There's not really a single dud on here. I mean, Enter Sandman, I admit, gets a little overplayed in my mind. Holier Than Thou and The God That Failed, I don't think are like absolutely strong songs or anything. In fact, I think they're among the weaker songs in the album, but they're still good songs. I still like them a lot, just not to the extent as many of the other songs on here. I like the fact that every song is given its own individual feel. While it may seem more like a collection of songs as opposed to like a whole album, the way that the previous four albums felt, this still is a very solid album throughout. You could listen to it perfectly fine and not feel the need to skip anything because every track has its place and it's still really solid all the way through. There's a lot of variety present on this album, which I really, really enjoy. Musically speaking, you have heavy hitters like Sad But True and The God That Failed. Then you have ballads like The Unforgiven and Nothing Else Matters. Then you have little riff fests like Through the Never and The Struggle Within. So each song, as a result, definitely has its own individual feel. That's why it has that individualized feel, because every song is just distinct from one another as a result of the different ideas that each song has, and they're all very strong ideas in that regard. There's also a lot of variety, like lyrically and thematically as well. You go from a wide range of topics, really. You're dealing with nightmares, you're dealing with cancer, you're dealing with religion, patriotism, traveling out on the road, depression, and the unknown, essentially, with Through the Never being, if you're wondering what that was from. But I think you get a much better idea of the other songs that I've mentioned the lyrical themes for. You just gotta listen through, look at the lyrics and all that, and you definitely get a good idea of what I'm saying because yeah, musically speaking, lyrically speaking, this is definitely very diverse. Metallica has always been a pretty diverse band, but I think it's really apparent on the Black Album how much diversity is present within um, the actual content itself. Of course, this album has spawned some huge live and radio staples. The five singles, Wherever I May Roam, Sad But True, Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, and Nothing Else Matters. They are all songs that you'll hear on the radio, that you'll listen to live. At pretty much every concert that they've ever done since the Black Album tour, you'll definitely hear like the majority of these five singles, whether you want to or not. I mean, personally, I've only heard Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, and Enter Sandman on the radio, but I've definitely heard that Wherever I May Roam and Sad But True are played on the radio too. I just don't know which station. But trust me, these are huge, huge singles, and they're basically instant winners with a lot of people. There's also a lot of underrated gems on this album, like My Friend in Misery, which is one of the very few writing credits that Jason Newsted ever got in his time with the band. He wrote this really awesome bass line that pulsates throughout the song, which I really, really like. This is one of my favorites for sure. You have Struggle Within, you have Through the Never, you got Of Wolf and Man, you got ton of great, like more underrated songs that you barely hear this band play live. Don't Tread on Me is another one. These are all really great songs, which definitely is one of the reasons why I claim this to be one of my top 5 favorite Metallica albums. In fact, this is probably my third favorite Metallica album behind And Justice for All and Ride the Lightning for that very reason. There's just definitely a lot of great songs on here despite the change in style, and it works off perfectly. I mean, they were already just coming off fresh from their thrash albums and stuff, and to be able to convert that into this more heavy metal, like hard rocky sort of style, definitely paid off in dividends. Though this album is much maligned by many of the old school thrashers and people who have heard of this album's reputation, and they want to look cool by jumping on the Metallica hate bandwagon, even if they haven't listened to much from this album, I still think this is one of Metallica's finest. Not necessarily topping many of the classics from the 80s, but um, I think it's topped for me. Like at this point, I think it's tops Master of Puppets and Kill 'Em All. It doesn't quite top Injustice for All or Ride the Lightning for me personally, but this is still a very great release, showing that even if they're not playing like all-out thrash metal, they can still put out a damn good release when they give it their best shot. And so, yeah, there you go. Unfortunately, this is where much of the good stuff is about to end, at least studio wise or like original material wise. Um, yeah, this is basically like after this album, the train starts to derail a bit, and I don't think it's gonna quite get back on track, but we'll see. We'll see. Load and Reload are next.